The morning steam from the espresso machine created a familiar haze in Sunrise Cafe, and Maya wiped her hands on her apron for the 100th time that day. The clock showed 6:47 a.m., and she had already been working for 2 hours, preparing for the morning rush that would soon flood through the narrow doorway of the small establishment, tucked between a laundromat and a bookstore on Maple Street. Maya had worked at the cafe for 3 years now, ever since she turned 18 and realized that her dreams of art school would have to wait. The pay barely covered her studio apartment rent and groceries, but she found an odd comfort in the routine. There was something peaceful about grinding coffee beans before dawn, arranging pastries in the display case, and watching the city slowly wake up through the large front windows. The bell above the door chimed, and Maya looked up from the register to see her first regular customer of the day. Daniel always arrived at exactly 6:50 a.m., dressed in worn jeans and a simple gray sweater that had seen better days. His dark hair was slightly tousled, as if he had just rolled out of bed, and he carried a weathered leather messenger bag that looked like it had traveled the world. "Good morning, Maya," he said with a gentle smile that reached his warm brown eyes. "The usual?" "Of course," she replied, already reaching for a medium cup. "Dark roast, black, no sugar." She had memorized his order months ago, along with the orders of most regulars, but Daniel was different somehow. While other customers barely acknowledged her existence, rushing in and out while talking on their phones or checking their watches impatiently, Daniel always made eye contact. He asked about her day, remembered details from previous conversations, and spoke to her like she mattered. As she poured his coffee, Maya noticed the way his hands wrapped around the cup when she handed it to him. Strong hands with calluses that suggested he worked with them, though she had never asked what he did for a living. There was something both rugged and gentle about him that intrigued her, but she had learned not to get too curious about customers' personal lives. "How's your painting coming along?" Daniel asked, settling onto one of the worn bar stools at the counter. Unlike most customers who grabbed their coffee and ran, he often stayed for 10 or 15 minutes, especially when the cafe wasn't busy. Maya felt her cheeks warm slightly. She had mentioned her artwork only once, weeks ago, during a particularly slow afternoon when she was sketching in her notepad behind the counter. The fact that he remembered touched something deep inside her chest. "Slowly," she admitted, wiping down the already clean counter. "I've been working on a series of cityscapes, but it's hard to find time between here and my evening shift at the diner." Daniel nodded thoughtfully, taking a slow sip of his coffee. "2 jobs must be exhausting." "It keeps me busy," Maya said, though the weight of constant work pressed on her shoulders like a heavy blanket. "What about you? What do you do when you're not drinking coffee at ungodly hours?" Something flickered across Daniel's expression, so quickly that Maya almost missed it. "Oh, this and that," he said vaguely. "Nothing too exciting. I like to keep things simple." There was something in his tone that suggested the conversation had reached its natural boundary, so Maya didn't push. She had learned to respect people's privacy, especially the quiet ones like Daniel who seemed to carry invisible burdens. The bell chimed again, and the morning rush began in earnest. Daniel finished his coffee, left exact change plus a generous tip, and headed toward the door. "See you tomorrow, Maya," he called over the growing noise of the cafe filling with customers. "See you tomorrow," she replied, watching him disappear into the crowd of commuters on the sidewalk. As Maya served the next customer, she found herself thinking about Daniel's smile and the way he said her name like it meant something. In her world of rushed orders and barely there acknowledgments, those small moments of genuine connection felt like rare treasures. She had no idea that the man in the worn sweater who treated her coffee like a sacred ritual was about to change her life in ways she couldn't possibly imagine. 3 weeks later, Maya arrived at work to find the ancient espresso machine making concerning grinding noises that sounded like a dying animal. She had mentioned the problem to her manager, Tony, countless times, but he always brushed off her concerns with promises of getting to it eventually. "Come on, don't die on me now," Maya whispered to the machine, giving it a gentle pat as she tried to coax it through the morning routine. At exactly 6:50 a.m., Daniel walked through the door, but instead of heading straight to his usual spot at the counter, he paused when he heard the machine's tortured sounds. "That doesn't sound good," he observed, setting his messenger bag down and walking around the counter without invitation. "Oh, you don't have to." Maya started, but Daniel was already examining the machine with the focused attention of someone who understood mechanical things. "Mind if I take a look?" he asked, rolling up the sleeves of his faded blue shirt. Maya noticed the muscles in his forearms as he moved, and something fluttered in her stomach. "I mean, if you want to, but Tony will probably—" "Tony's not here," Daniel said with a small smile. "And this machine is about to give up completely if someone doesn't adjust the pressure valve." Maya watched in amazement as Daniel's hands worked, with confident precision, accessing parts of the machine she didn't even know existed. Within 10 minutes, the espresso machine was purring like a contented cat, producing perfect shots with none of the previous grinding and wheezing. "How did you learn to do that?" Maya asked, genuinely impressed. Daniel shrugged, washing his hands in the small sink behind the counter. "I pick things up here and there. My father always said a man should know how to fix what's broken." There was something wistful in his voice when he mentioned his father, but before Maya could ask more, the morning rush began. Throughout the busy period, she found herself stealing glances at Daniel, who had stayed longer than usual, seeming to enjoy watching her work with the newly functioning machine. The next day, Maya discovered that someone had oiled the squeaky hinges on the front door and tightened the wobbly leg on table 3. When she mentioned it to Daniel during his visit, he just smiled and changed the subject to ask about her painting. "I brought you something," he said the following morning, reaching into his messenger bag. He pulled out a small set of professional-grade paintbrushes still in their packaging. Maya stared at the brushes, her heart racing. "Daniel, I can't accept these. They must have cost—" "Please," he said softly, his brown eyes serious. "I saw you using that old brush with the split bristles last week. An artist deserves proper tools." The way he said artist made Maya's chest tighten with emotion. No one had ever called her that before, not even her own family, who saw her painting as a frivolous hobby that wouldn't pay the bills. "Thank you," she whispered, running her fingers over the smooth handles. This is really thoughtful." Their hands brushed as she took the brushes, and Maya felt electricity shoot up her arm. Daniel's fingers lingered against hers for just a moment longer than necessary, his thumb tracing softly across her knuckles before he pulled away. As the weeks passed, their morning conversations grew longer and more intimate. Daniel would arrive early and stay late, helping Maya with small tasks around the cafe while they talked about everything and nothing. She learned that he loved old movies and could quote entire scenes from Casablanca. He discovered that she dreamed of having her own art studio someday, somewhere with large windows and natural light. One particularly busy morning, Maya was juggling multiple orders when she stumbled, sending a tray of mugs crashing to the floor. The cafe fell silent as ceramic shards scattered across the tiles, and Maya felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. "I'm so sorry," she began, but Daniel was already beside her, his strong hands gently grasping her shoulders. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice filled with concern as he guided her away from the broken pieces. "No, I'm fine, just clumsy," Maya said, but her hands were shaking. Daniel knelt down and began carefully collecting the larger pieces of ceramic, while other customers stepped around the mess, some muttering impatiently about the delay. Maya watched him work, touched by his immediate willingness to help without being asked. "You're not clumsy," he said quietly as they cleaned up together. "You're doing the work of 3 people. Anyone would stumble eventually." The sincerity in his voice made Maya's throat tight with unexpected emotion. When was the last time someone had defended her instead of pointing out her mistakes? That afternoon, during the slower period between lunch and dinner rushes, Daniel appeared again, something he had never done before. "I was in the neighborhood," he said, though Maya suspected that wasn't entirely true. "Thought you might like some company during the quiet hours." He settled at the counter with a book, reading while Maya worked on inventory and prep for the next day. The comfortable silence between them felt intimate and domestic, like they were sharing space in a way that went beyond customer and server. Daniel, Maya said eventually, surprising herself with her boldness. Would you like to see some of my paintings sometime? He looked up from his book, and the smile that spread across his face was brilliant. I would love that more than anything. As Maya watched him return to his reading, she realized that somewhere between the fixed espresso machine and the gentle way he said her name, she had begun falling for the quiet man in worn clothes who treated her like she was precious. Maya's hands trembled as she held the newspaper, reading the headline for the third time. Tech heir Daniel Blackwood donates $50 million to environmental causes. Below the headline was a photograph that made her stomach drop. Daniel in an expensive suit standing next to a gleaming luxury car, shaking hands with what appeared to be government officials. She had found the newspaper on the counter at the end of her shift, left behind by a customer. She almost didn't look at it. But something about the photo had caught her eye. Now she wished she had never seen it. Daniel Blackwood, 28, heir to the Blackwood technology empire worth an estimated $800 million, continues his family's tradition of philanthropy. Maya sank onto one of the cafe's chairs, the newspaper crumpling, in her grip. Everything she thought she knew about Daniel, the worn clothes, the simple lifestyle, the way he understood what it meant to struggle, had been a lie. The bell above the door chimed, and Maya looked up to see Daniel walking in for his usual afternoon visit, the same gentle smile on his face that now felt like a mockery. Hey, he said, approaching the counter. Slow day? Maya stared at him, taking in details she had never questioned before. His worn jeans probably cost more than she made in a month. The messenger bag she had thought looked worldly was likely designer leather. Even his casual confidence, which she had found attractive, now seemed like the arrogance of someone who had never known real hardship. Maya, are you okay? Daniel's voice carried genuine concern, but Maya wondered if that was fake too. Daniel Blackwood, she said flatly, holding up the newspaper. The blood drained from Daniel's face, and Maya had her answer. He didn't deny it, didn't laugh and tell her it was a mistake. He just stood there looking like a man caught in a trap of his own making. I can explain, he said quietly. Can you? Maya stood up, anger rising in her chest like a tide. Can you explain why you've been lying to me for months? Can you explain why you let me tell you about working 2 jobs to make ends meet while you're worth hundreds of millions of dollars? It's not what you think. It's not what I think. Maya's voice rose, and she was grateful they were alone, in the cafe. What I think is that you've been playing some kind of game with me. What was I, Daniel? Entertainment? A charity case? Did you get some kind of thrill from slumming it with the poor girl who serves your coffee? Daniel stepped forward, his hands raised as if approaching a wounded animal. Maya, please let me explain. I never meant for it to happen this way. You never meant for what to happen? For me to find out who you really are? Or for me to start caring about you? The words tumbled out before Maya could stop them, and she saw Daniel's eyes widen. You care about me? He asked softly. I thought I did, Maya said, wrapping her arms around herself. I thought I cared about Daniel, the regular customer who fixed my espresso machine and brought me paintbrushes. I don't know who you are. I'm the same person, Daniel said desperately. The money doesn't change who I am inside. Maya laughed, bitterly. Doesn't it? You've been lying to me every single day. Every time I worried about rent or talked about my dreams being too expensive, you just sat there and nodded sympathetically. Do you know how that makes me feel? Small, Daniel said quietly, and Maya was surprised by the accuracy of his guess. Used. Foolish. Yes, she whispered, tears threatening to spill over. All of those things. Daniel ran his hands through his hair, messing up the carefully casual style. I know how this looks, but I swear to you, Maya, I never meant to hurt you. When I first started coming here, I was just trying to escape. The money, the expectations, the people who only see dollar signs when they look at me. You saw me as just a person. Because you lied to me. Maya shot back. Because you didn't know, Daniel corrected. And for the first time in years, someone treated me like I mattered for reasons that had nothing to do with my bank account. Maya wanted to stay angry, but something in Daniel's voice made her pause. There was pain there, genuine pain that matched her own. "I don't know what's real anymore," she said, wiping away a tear that had escaped. "Were you ever really my friend, or was this all just some kind of experiment?" Daniel moved closer, stopping just out of arm's reach. "Everything between us is real, Maya. The way I feel about you is real. The way you make me laugh, the way you talk about your art with such passion, the way you make me want to be a better person, all of that is real." "How am I supposed to believe you?" Maya asked. "How am I supposed to trust anything you say when you've been lying to me from the beginning?" Daniel's shoulders sagged in defeat. "I don't know," he admitted. "I don't know how to prove to you that despite the lies about who I am, everything else was true." Maya looked at him standing there, this man who had become so important to her, daily routine to her happiness, and felt her heart breaking. "I need time to think," she said finally. Daniel nodded, pulling his wallet from his pocket, an expensive leather wallet that Maya now recognized as probably costing more than her monthly grocery budget. "Keep your money," Maya said sharply. "I don't want it." Daniel's hand froze halfway to his wallet. He looked at Maya with such raw hurt that she almost relented, but then she remembered the photograph of him in his expensive suit, and her resolve hardened. "I'll leave you alone," Daniel said quietly. "But Maya, please know that nothing about how I feel about you was a lie." He turned and walked out of the cafe, and Maya watched him go, wondering if she had just lost the best thing in her life, or if she had escaped from an elaborate deception before it could hurt her even more. For 3 days, Maya's routine felt broken. She arrived at work each morning, prepared Daniel's usual coffee out of habit, then had to pour it out when 6:50 a.m. came and went without his familiar presence. The espresso machine ran smoothly, a constant reminder of his kindness, but the cafe felt empty without his quiet company. Maya threw herself into her work, taking extra shifts at both the cafe and the diner, trying to exhaust herself enough that she wouldn't lie awake at night thinking about Daniel's hurt expression when she had refused his money, but no amount of work could quiet the voice in her head that whispered she might have made a mistake. On the 4th day, Maya was closing the cafe alone when she heard a soft knock on the glass door. She looked up to see Daniel standing outside, looking haggard and uncertain. Against her better judgment, she unlocked the door. "I know you said you needed time," Daniel began, "but I couldn't stay away knowing you were angry and hurting." Maya stepped aside to let him in, then locked the door behind him. The cafe felt different with just the two of them there after hours. More intimate, more dangerous to her already fragile emotional state. "I brought you something," Daniel said, reaching into his messenger bag. He pulled out a manila folder, thick with papers. "I thought you should know the truth about everything." Maya took the folder reluctantly and opened it. Inside were financial documents, charity records, and what appeared to be legal papers. She looked up at Daniel in confusion. "My trust fund," Daniel explained, settling into one of the chairs. "I've been giving most of it away since I turned 18. The house I live in? It's a small apartment above a bookstore 6 blocks from here. The clothes I wear? I buy them at thrift stores because I feel more comfortable in them than in anything expensive." Maya flipped through the papers, seeing donation after donation to various charities, environmental causes, and educational foundations. The amounts were staggering. "Why?" she asked. Daniel was quiet for a long moment. "My father built his fortune by buying up failing companies and firing half their employees to increase profits. He was a brilliant businessman and a terrible human being. When he died and left me everything, I decided I didn't want to be him. So you gave it all away?" "Most of it. I kept enough to live simply and to keep donating regularly. I work part-time at a nonprofit that helps people find affordable housing." Daniel's laugh was self-deprecating. Ironic, considering I inherited my wealth from someone who contributed to the housing crisis. Maya sank into the chair across from him, the folder still open in her lap. "Why didn't you just tell me this from the beginning?" "Because I was scared," Daniel admitted. "Every time I've told someone about the money, even when I explain what I've done with it, they either see me as a bank account or as a freak who gave my away a fortune. You were the first person in years who looked at me and saw just me. But I was wrong about who you are, Maya said softly. Were you? Daniel leaned forward, his eyes earnest. You saw someone who cared about fixing broken things, who listened when you talked about your dreams, who thought you were talented and deserving of good tools for your art. That person is real, Maya. That person is who I choose to be, Yarao. Closed the folder and set it aside, studying Daniel's face. Without the cloud of betrayal coloring her perception, she could see the truth in his expression. The vulnerability, the hope, the fear that she might reject him again. I was so angry, she said. Not just about the money, but because I had feelings for you and I thought they were based on a lie. They weren't, Daniel said urgently. Maya, everything you felt, I felt too. The way you make me laugh, the way you remember small details about my day, the way you light up when you talk about painting. None of that had anything to do with money. Maya stood up and began pacing behind the counter, her emotions churning. It's not that simple, Daniel. We come from completely different worlds. Even if you've given most of it away, you still have options I could never dream of. You could walk away from both your jobs tomorrow and be fine. I can't. You're right, Daniel said, standing as well. I can't pretend to understand what it's like to worry about rent or choose between groceries and art supplies. But I can tell you that meeting you made me want to understand. You made me want to be worthy of the way you saw me. They stared at each other across the small cafe, the tension thick between them. Maya's heart was racing, torn between the hurt of his deception and the undeniable pull she felt toward him. If we tried to make this work, Maya said, carefully, how would we navigate the differences between us? Together, Daniel said simply. One day at a time, one honest conversation at a time. No more lies? Maya asked. No more lies, Daniel promised. Even when the truth is complicated or uncomfortable. Maya walked around the counter until she was standing directly in front of Daniel. She could smell his familiar cologne, see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes, feel the warmth radiating from his body. I missed you, she admitted quietly. Daniel's face transformed with relief and hope. I missed you too. These past few days felt like a lifetime. Slowly, carefully, Daniel reached up to cup Maya's face in his hands. His thumbs traced gentle circles on her cheekbones as he searched her eyes for permission. Can I kiss you? He whispered. Instead of answering with words, Maya rose up on her toes and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, but as Daniel's arms wrapped around her waist and pulled her closer, Maya felt all her remaining resistance melt away. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, Daniel rested his forehead against hers. I want to do this right, he said. I want to court you properly, take you on real dates, meet your friends and family. I want them to know that you mean everything to me. Maya smiled, her first genuine smile in days. I'd like that, she said. But Daniel, next time you have a secret that big, please just tell me. I'd rather know the complicated truth than live a simple lie. Deal, Daniel said, sealing his promise, with another kiss that tasted like hope and new beginnings. 2 months later, Maya stood in the small gallery space that Daniel had helped her rent, putting the finishing touches on her first solo art exhibition. The walls were covered with her cityscapes and portraits, each painting representing hours of work she had been able to dedicate to her craft, now that she had cut back to one job. The lighting on this one is perfect, Daniel said, adjusting the spot illuminating Maya's favorite piece, a painting of the sunrise through the cafe windows, with 2 coffee cups sitting on the counter. Maya smiled, watching him work. True, to his word, Daniel had been completely honest about everything in his life. She had met his small circle of close friends, all of whom worked in nonprofits or social causes. She had learned about his complicated relationship with his late father and his determination to use his inherited privilege responsibly. Are you nervous? Daniel asked, walking over to where Maya stood surveying the space. Terrified, Maya admitted. What if nobody comes? What if they hate everything? Daniel wrapped his arms around her from behind, kissing the top of her head. Then we'll eat all the cheese and crackers ourselves and call it a very expensive private date. Maya laughed, leaning back against his chest. The past 2 months had been a whirlwind of adjustment as they learned to navigate their relationship with complete honesty. There had been difficult conversations about money, about privilege, about their different backgrounds. But there had also been moments of pure joy, like when Daniel had surprised her with a studio space in his building, or when Maya had introduced him to her parents and watched him charm her mother by asking for her famous lasagna recipe. 5 minutes until opening, called Rebecca, Maya's best friend who had insisted on helping with the gallery opening. Maya turned in Daniel's arms, suddenly needing the reassurance of his touch. What if this changes everything between us? What if success makes me different? Daniel cupped her face gently, his thumb tracing her lower lip. Then we'll figure it out together, just like we've figured out everything else. The tenderness in his voice made Maya's heart flutter. Over the past weeks, their relationship had deepened beyond the initial physical attraction and friendship. They had shared quiet mornings in bed, talking about their dreams for the future. They had argued about silly things like what movie to watch, then made up with passion that left them both breathless. They had learned each other's bodies and hearts with equal dedication. I love you, Maya said, the words still feeling new and precious on her tongue. I love you too, Daniel replied, kissing her softly, more than I ever thought possible. The gallery door opened, and Maya's stomach clenched with nerves as the first visitors began to arrive. But Daniel's hand in hers steadied her, reminding her that whatever happened, they would face it together. The evening was a stunning success. Nearly every painting sold, and Maya found herself surrounded by admirers who praised her technique and vision. She watched Daniel from across the room, proud of how he had stepped back to let her shine while still being there whenever she needed his support. Excuse me. A well-dressed woman approached Maya. I'm Jennifer Walsh from the Morrison Gallery downtown. I'd love to discuss representing your work. Maya's eyes widened. The Morrison Gallery was one of the most prestigious spaces in the city. She looked across the room at Daniel, who was watching with a huge smile on his face. Later that night, after the gallery had emptied and Rebecca had gone home, Maya and Daniel walked hand in hand back to her apartment. The city lights twinkled around them, and Maya felt like she was floating. I can't believe this is really happening, she said, squeezing Daniel's hand. I can, Daniel replied. I've believed in your talent from the first sketch I saw you working, on behind the cafe counter. They climbed the stairs to Maya's small apartment, the same studio she had lived in when they first met. Daniel had offered to help her find a larger place, but Maya had insisted on waiting until she could afford the upgrade herself. It was important to her that their relationship be built on equal footing, even if their bank accounts would never match. Inside the apartment, Daniel pulled Maya into his arms, spinning her around in the small living space until they were both dizzy with laughter. We should celebrate, he murmured against her ear, his breath sending shivers down her spine. What did you have in mind? Maya asked, though the heat in Daniel's eyes gave her a pretty good idea. Instead of answering with words, Daniel began kissing her neck, his lips finding the sensitive spot below her ear that made her knees weak. Maya's hands tangled in his hair as he worked his way down to her collarbone, taking his time to worship every inch of skin he uncovered. You're incredible, Daniel whispered against her throat. Talented, beautiful, strong. I'm so lucky you gave me a second chance. Maya pulled back to look at him, her heart overflowing with love for this man who had seen her potential when she could barely see it herself. We're both lucky, she said, beginning to unbutton his shirt. We found each other despite all the reasons we shouldn't have worked. They made love that night with a passion intensified by pride, celebration, and the deep knowledge that they had built something real together. Afterward, as they lay tangled in Maya's sheets, Daniel traced patterns on her bare shoulder. I have something to ask you, he said quietly. Maya propped herself up on her elbow, studying his face in the moonlight streaming through her small window. What is it? Daniel reached over to the nightstand and pulled out a small velvet box. Maya's breath caught in her throat. I know we've only been together a few months, Daniel said, his voice nervous but determined. And I know we still have a lot to figure out, but Maya, I can't imagine my life without you in it. Will you marry me? Maya stared at the ring, a simple, elegant solitaire that was perfect in its understated beauty, and felt tears spring to her eyes. It's not about the money, Daniel continued quickly. It's not about changing our lives or rushing into anything we're not ready for. It's just, I want to promise you that I'm in this for the long haul. Through gallery openings and quiet coffee, mornings through arguments and makeups through whatever comes next. Maya's answer came in the form of a kiss that tasted like tears and joy and forever. When she finally pulled back, she was laughing and crying at the same time. Yes, she whispered. Yes. 1,000 times yes. As Daniel slipped the ring onto her finger, Maya thought about the journey that had brought them to this moment. From the humble beginning in a small cafe to this night of celebration and promises, they had learned that love transcended circumstances, that honesty was worth the risk of vulnerability, and that sometimes the most beautiful things grew from the simplest beginnings. I love you, Daniel Blackwood, Maya said, testing out how his full name sounded in her voice. I love you too, future Mrs. Blackwood, Daniel replied, and they both dissolved into laughter at the formal sound of it. Outside, the city continued, its restless movement, but inside Maya's small apartment, time seemed to slow as they held each other and planned a future that would be built on love, truth, and the simple joy of two hearts that had found their perfect match.